He said he'd get around to it. That damn box sat in the corner for 6 weeks, unopened, gathering dust like everything else he forgot. It wasn't about the tool, not really. But every time I passed it, I felt heavier. He worked late again. Sorry, meetings ran over, he said last night, like always. Kiss on the cheek, cold breath, straight to his laptop. We barely spoke anymore, unless it was about groceries or bills. He used to look at me, really look. Now, if I walked in wearing nothing but perfume, he'd ask if I'd seen his car keys. The silence wasn't loud, it was routine. Predictable. There was once music in the kitchen while we danced barefoot. Now I cook alone. Sometimes I leave the radio on to pretend there's still life echoing through the house. The only things that hum now are the fridge and the tension. That black box became a symbol. A simple task he kept delaying. I'll do it this weekend, he said. Weekend came and went. Then another. He always had reasons: exhaustion, deadlines, needing to decompress. So I stopped asking. I stopped reminding. I let it become part of the room, like the furniture we never rearranged. At night, I'd lie in bed awake and imagine what it'd be like to be touched without distraction. Just once. To feel warmth that wasn't obligatory. Not mechanical. I wasn't looking for trouble, just presence. But he gave all his presence to screens, spreadsheets, and stock reports. My skin forgot what attention felt like. A few days ago, I noticed the neighbor's garden was blooming again. I hadn't seen Mark in a while, but his house always felt lived in. Music sometimes played through his windows. He waved once, maybe twice. He had fixed his own porch light last summer, while my husband Googled how to videos and never got past step one. Mark was younger, not by much. Tall, grounded, easygoing. I never thought much about him, until the tool kept sitting untouched. This morning I walked past it again, paused, and knelt beside it. I peeled back the tape just a little, saw the edge of something matte black and sleek. It looked sturdy, useful, the kind of thing that should have been handled by now. I pressed the flap, closed again. Didn't say anything when my husband left, late and distracted, coffee half finished. Just watched him go. Later that day, I stood staring at the box when I heard someone outside. Lawnmower. Mark. Shirt off, wiping his face with a towel. Our eyes met through the window. I turned away too quickly, but not quickly enough. The box was still there that night, as silent and neglected as I felt. I touched its edge again. Noticed how perfectly the size fit the space in the hallway. Noticed how I didn't feel guilty for imagining someone else installing it. I didn't feel guilty at all. The power flickered that morning. Not out completely, just enough to make the clock reset and the light stutter. I didn't think much of it until the kettle wouldn't start. I called the electrician out of habit, but the line was busy. Then I remembered Mark. He'd mentioned once that he did some wiring on the side. I found his number in the neighborhood group chat and texted him. Short, casual. Hey, quick question about a power glitch. He replied fast. I'll swing by in 10. He showed up in jeans and a worn t-shirt, tools in hand, hair damp like he'd just come from a shower. He smiled when I opened the door. A real smile, not polite, not distracted. Still having issues? He asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He checked the breaker, flipped a few switches, then followed the line inside. He noticed the unopened box almost immediately. That knew. I didn't answer right away. He crouched beside it, reading the label. Easy install, he said. Shouldn't take more than an hour. I almost laughed. It's been waiting 6 weeks, I said. He looked up at me, expression unreadable. Need help with it? The question was casual, but something about the way he asked made me hesitate. I told him he didn't have to. He shrugged. I've got time. We moved the box together. It wasn't heavy, just awkward. Our hands brushed briefly. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. He opened the packaging carefully, pulling each piece out with precision. He laid them on the floor like he'd done this 100 times. I offered him water. He took it, drank half the glass in one go. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. He asked about the wiring, about the original plan. I told him my husband was supposed to install it. He busy, he asked. I nodded. Always. Mark's hands moved confidently over the parts. He talked while he worked, little things. Music, his sister's wedding last month, how he liked putting things together. I listened more closely than I meant to. He asked me questions too. What I did. What I liked. I realized no one had asked me those in a long time. We weren't flirting. Not exactly. But it felt warmer than anything I'd had in months. I laughed at something he said about mismatched screws, and he looked at me like it mattered. Like I mattered. At one point, he stood to measure the mounting points, and I reached to steady the base. Our hands met again, this time resting a little too long. Neither of us moved. The pause wasn't awkward, it was charged. Unspoken. I stepped back, not because I wanted to, but because I had to remind myself this wasn't supposed to happen. He didn't press. Just nodded and went back to work. But now we were both aware of the shift. He kept working. I kept watching. Something had changed. We both knew it, and neither of us said a word. He asked for a screwdriver, the flat one. I handed it to him, fingertips brushing again. This time, he didn't look away. His eyes lingered. Mine did too. He went back to tightening something near the base of the panel, jaw flexing as he focused. I stayed close, not because I needed to, but because I didn't want to leave. A low hum came from the hallway light, then silence. Power flickered again. I'll need to check the junction, he said, voice lower now. He moved past me, close enough that I caught the scent of clean soap and warm skin. I followed. The hallway was dim, the air heavier. The fuse box tripped. He reset it with a firm click, but as the lights came back on, something shifted inside me. My breathing was shallow. I turned to say something, I don't even remember what. He was closer than before. No words, just waiting. Watching. I didn't think. I just leaned in. The kiss wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was weeks, months, of silence unraveling. Hands in my hair, mine gripping the front of his shirt. I felt everything I'd been missing in that one impossible moment. He pulled back like he needed to make sure I was still there. I was. So I kissed him again. We moved like we'd done this before in another life. No rush, no guilt. Just heat and closeness and skin meeting skin in quiet understanding. He guided me gently against the wall, his hand at my waist, mine tracing the curve of his neck. It wasn't just desire. It was hunger. For touch, for feeling, for being noticed. He whispered my name once. Just once. I closed my eyes and let go of everything else. The sound of tools falling onto the floor snapped us back, just slightly. But neither of us stepped away. His hands found the small of my back. My breath hitched. He exhaled like he'd been holding it in for days. Maybe he had. No one said, "This is wrong." No one said anything. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full. Of choices, of questions we weren't ready to answer. We pulled apart only when the installation needed finishing. He straightened the final bracket, wiped sweat from his brow. I helped hold the panel in place. The last screw turned easily. The tool was in. It worked. Lights on. Perfectly aligned. No noise, no glitches. Just done.
He looked at me.
Not with pride about the work, but something else. Something that asked, now what? I didn't respond. I couldn't. My heart was still racing, lips still tingling, skin still warm. He packed up quietly. I stood by the mounted device, fingers tracing the edge of it like it held meaning.
It did.
He said, "If you need anything else," I nodded, didn't meet his eyes. When he left, the silence returned. But it felt different now. I didn't feel neglected anymore. I felt undone. The house was quiet when he came home. He didn't notice anything different. Not the freshly mounted panel. Not the absence of clutter. Not me standing still in the hallway like I'd forgotten what to do next. He kissed the top of my head in passing, set his bag down, and asked what was for dinner. I told him it was in the oven.
He didn't ask about my day.
He never did. He walked right past the new installation, barely glanced at it. I waited for comment. A question. Even a nod. Nothing. He didn't even ask who had done it. I stared at the tool for a long time.
Perfectly placed.
Clean lines. Everything tight. Not a screw out of place. It was beautiful, really. And yet, all I could think about was how quickly he had moved on from ignoring it. After dinner, he fell asleep on the couch, TV on low, hand still holding his phone. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where Mark had stood just hours ago. I remembered the weight of his touch, the way his breath had tangled with mine. The contrast was sharp. One man in my house and completely absent. Another outside of it and fully present. My chest tightened. I didn't know if it was guilt or clarity. My phone buzzed once. A message from Mark. Let me know if it works okay. Simple. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust myself to keep it simple. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, the same one I'd been staring at for years. It hadn't changed, but I had. The truth is, I didn't feel sorry. Not in the way I thought I would. There was no panic, no shame racing through me. Just a quiet knowing that something had shifted and couldn't be reversed. I had crossed a line, yes. But I had also woken up. That kiss, that touch, it reminded me that I still had a pulse. That I hadn't gone completely numb. He snored softly from the living room. I wondered if he'd ever ask who fixed it. I knew he wouldn't. He would assume I hired someone. Pay a bill, without looking at the name. Thank me for handling it. That was our rhythm. I managed, he avoided. I endured, he assumed. And now, part of me resented how easy it would be for this to disappear into the silence we lived in. I got up, walked to the hallway, and stared at the mounted tool again. My fingers ran along its edge, smooth and cold. Perfect fit. Installed exactly where it should have been weeks ago. Useful. Functional. Respected. There was something poetic about it. How the one who noticed me, touched me, gave me breath, left only that behind. No note. No mess. Just something finished, something whole. A trace of him, right there on the wall. The house held its breath with me. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stood there, staring at what was finally done.